You know, Franciscan is one of the very first schools that I ever spoke at after I published my blank book and started my, for some reason it followed that I had a public speaking career after the blank book. And this was one of the first schools I ever spoke at. Since that time, I've been to many college campuses, and every single time, you know what happens? The libs call me all sorts of names. They do me, lovable me. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? All the usual ones. They call me racist, sexist, phobic. But the charge they hurl at me most often these days, anti-science. They do. They do. Doesn't matter what I'm talking about. Could be talking about the coronavirus, gender, global warming, whatever. The most frequent accusation these days, tantamount to a charge of blasphemy, is that I am anti-science. And to that accusation, I say, guilty as charged. I know that many conservatives fear being called anti-science because it makes them feel foolish and ignorant. That's why they try to ground all of their arguments in scientific jargon. You know, when the liberals call us anti-science for denying their alleged breakthroughs in the science of sex and gender, what do the conservatives do? We hurl it right back at them. We accuse them of being anti-science for denying the scientific reality of sex. We refer to biological males, biological females, as if biology were the only thing that mattered in the whole world. When the libs accuse us of being anti-science for objecting to their taking away all of our rights and freedoms and way of life for 2 years, what do? Why, we throw that insult right back at them. We say, no, you're anti-science. And then we recite a litany of scientific arguments for why hankies on our face would not prevent a global pandemic, as if there were no other reason other than science not to give all of our political power away to a diminutive technocrat in a lab coat. When the liberals call us anti-science for doubting that the world will end in 10 years, I think probably more like 8 or 9 years now, I forget when AOC made the prophecy. When they call us anti-science for doubting that, if we don't destroy our economy and radically alter the way that we eat, work, get around, heat our homes, do pretty much everything else that we do, what do we say? We say, nuh-uh, you're anti-science. And then we cite our own statistics about sea levels and storms and temperatures and whatever, as though science were the ultimate, the only authority when it comes to ascertaining the truth. I'm sick of it. I don't care if the liberals call me foolish or ignorant or a knuckle-dragging troglodyte. I don't. I'm not going to play their game. I am not going to worship their false god. I am not going to take their epistemological bait. It may be true, okay, that they call us anti-science. Fine. Science is totally fake. There, I said it. I don't care. Conservatives say we're not anti-science. Maybe that's true, but we damn well should be, as far as I'm concerned. We should, at the very least, be much more skeptical of the pretenses of science than we are right now. For starters, I don't know if you all are history buffs in this room, but as a purely historical matter, science has been wrong about pretty much everything at some point for all of history. I'm not just talking about the past couple of years. I'm not just talking about the World Health Organization and the CDC and the NIH and our old pal Dr. Fauci, all of whom made mistakes and told outright lies about COVID, its origin, the masks, the social distancing, the vaccines, the lockdowns, and most everything else. I'm not even talking about relatively recent historical scientific flubs, say at 1949 when the neurologist Antonio Egas Moniz won the Nobel Prize for inventing the lobotomy. Little bit of a black mark on science, but I'm not even just talking about that. I mean to look much more broadly at the category of science as a whole, because virtually every single scientific theory about every single thing has been disproven, upended, or replaced at some point. There was, for example, the theory of the spontaneous generation of life, widely accepted for millennia that complex life springs from inanimate objects. That was knocked down in the 19th century by Louis Pasteur, who proved biogenesis, the notion that life is generated only from other life, the diversity of which, it was held for millennia, derives from a single act of creation, a theory that was replaced, according to scientists of the 17th century, by a theory of transmutation, and then the genealogical ascent of species, which was in turn replaced in the next century by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's theory that organisms pass on traits that they acquired during their lives to their children. That was a theory that was in turn disproven and replaced in the following century by Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection and by Mendelian inheritance, which in turn has been complicated, if not contradicted, by the observation of epigenetics and a return to the formerly discredited views of Lamarck, all of which has been questioned in recent years, not only by kooks and cranks, but by very serious scientists with very stellar academic credentials. I'm thinking of David Berlinski from Princeton, David Gelernter from Yale, who have argued that the theory of evolution is no longer mathematically tenable. I don't mention any of these theories of life to endorse one over another, but simply to show that science, she's a fickle lady, isn't she? She is. And though the scientists are frequently wrong, they are almost never in doubt, which is why today scientists, and really not even so much the scientists as the broader disciples of science, insist that we accept their current consensus on any matter that they deem important. Any topic, global warming, the origin of life, human sexuality, you name it. We must believe precisely the view that just so happens to be fashionable in the year of our Lord 2022, or else we are ignorant, idiot, science deniers. Although wildly divergent and contradictory scientific theories have constantly cropped up and collapsed throughout all of human history, today apparently the scientists have resolved every problem and know everything about every other thing, and that's never going to change, and only a dummy wouldn't trust them. Now, some will object and say, Michael, you're cherry picking. Most other scientific theories are not so meandering and contradictory, but rather show a steady development and progress. Say, for example, our understanding of our own place in the universe. Contrary to a popular misconception, we have pretty much always known that the Earth is not flat. Pythagoras postulated a spherical Earth about 500 years before Christ, but the ancient models placed the Earth, and therefore man, at the center of the universe. In the 2nd century AD, the astronomer Ptolemy observed that the planets don't appear to orbit the Earth in perfect circles. Some planets, in fact, like Mars, seem to go backwards sometimes before they go forward. Again, this gave rise to the theory of planetary epicycles, the idea that the planets go around in circles as they more broadly go around the Earth in circles. This theory was replaced in the 16th century by Copernicus and the heliocentric model, which held that planets, including the Earth, revolve around the sun. Though a preface to his book, The Revolutions of the Celestial Spheres, insisted that this model was only for the purpose of calculation and not to be taken literally. This is why Copernicus was treated more nicely than, say, Mr. Galileo or some other people. Decades later, Tycho Brahe upended all of those previous models by showing that the celestial spheres do not exist, which has given way to various and sundry theories of the universe as finite and infinite and static and expanding. Today, the predominant view is known as the Big Bang, which was observed by Father Georges Lemaitre, though present-day liberals who are unsatisfied with a theory that corresponds so well with the Christian account of creation have theorized, with no evidence whatsoever, that we're all living in a multiverse or a simulation or a video game or I don't know, whatever. In any case, the present conception of the cosmos is one in which Earth and man exist as infinitesimally small blips in some far-flung part of cold, dead space. But does that really represent the truth of man's position? In a physical sense, perhaps, man is not the center of the universe. But in a deeper sense, man is, in fact, the center of the universe. Man is where the physical and the metaphysical realms meet. That is not just some flight of fancy. It is not even solely the understanding of Christians or some other religious group. It is, in fact, just a simple fact accepted by all people, without which none of us could do any of the things that we do every day. We all know and behave as though, whether we want to admit it or not, man is both body and rational soul, flesh and intellect. Animals exist in body, but they don't have a rational soul. This is why we don't put cats on trial for scratching people. Ideas exist. Ideas motivate much of our lives, if not most of our lives, but ideas do not have bodies. Dreams, joys, terrors, these things exist. Angels, demons, these things exist too, even though some people don't want to admit it. But none of those things have bodies. Only in man do we see the meeting of these two realms. That is the reason that we and we alone in the world can even talk about such things. So, between the two conceptions of the universe that we've just discussed, the ancient view of man at the center of the cosmos and the modern scientific view of man as an inconsequential blip in some far-flung random region of emptiness, which is the more accurate representation of reality? Which tells us more about the way things really are? This is the point in the discussion when one of my favorite words usually crops up, one of the most paradoxical words in the English language: literally. People will be tempted to say, well, Michael, it is literally true. That is, they mean it might be figuratively true that man is the center of the universe, but it is literally true that the Earth revolves around the Sun, in the Milky Way galaxy, in the Virgo supercluster, in the Laniakea supercluster, in the Pisces Cetus supercluster complex, which is located right in the middle of God only knows where. But is that literally true? What does literally even mean? People tend to think of literal as meaning the opposite of metaphorical or symbolic. But that literally cannot be true because literal refers to letters which are symbols. I am not being cute or obtuse here. Well, I'm always being cute. I'm always trying. But I am not being obtuse. This is not just some trick of language or some glib observation. The fact that even literal has a symbolic meaning tells us something important about the nature of reality. This is not a novel use of the word. F. Scott Fitzgerald, James Joyce, Mark Twain, teenage girls since time immemorial have all used literally to mean figuratively. It is not an error, it's a crucial insight. It is the insight that nothing is without meaning. Modern medical science has led to many fine things. Longer life, better nutrition, better dentistry, I don't know. It has also etched into our minds a new representation of man as purely physical, at the very least fundamentally physical, a machine to be poked and prodded and tuned up. We reflect this in our language. We no longer get excited. We just feel a rush of adrenaline. We no longer feel happy. We get a hit of dopamine. We no longer feel sad or blue or melancholic. Now we have a chemical imbalance, which is a scientific representation, by the way, that has just recently completely fallen apart, even as a representation. But that's how we talk. Modern astronomy has led to some wonderful things. Satellites, for instance, for smartphones on which you can listen to the Michael Knowles show. Phones on which you can go to the bookstore and you can order my book, Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, Reasons to Vote for Democrats, make superb Christmas presents. The wonderful things about astronomy. But modern astronomy has also created a new representation that makes man appear random and insignificant. And the scientific revolution as a whole, which has helped to build our modern world, has placed in our collective imagination a representation of reality as fundamentally physical. Many of the greatest scientists in history have been religious. At least two of the men that I just mentioned, Mendel and Lemaitre, were Catholic priests. And Copernicus maybe was too. He was at the very least a Catholic canon, if not a priest. So I'm not casting aspersions on scientists. other than Dr. Fauci. I am casting many aspersions on Dr. Fauci, but on the other scientists, I'm really not. But our modern conception of reality as fundamentally physical is not the result of some nefarious scientist. It is a feature, not a bug, of the whole scientific revolution, which necessarily considers the world only as physical. The philosopher Owen Barfield predicted all of this half a century ago in his book, Saving the Appearances. Barfield saw that the scientific worldview, left unchecked, would eventually eliminate all meaning and all coherence from the cosmos. He saw that it would lose its grip on any principle of unity pervading nature as a whole and the knowledge of nature, that it would give rise to the hypothesis of chance, randomness, creeping from the theory of evolution into the theory of the physical foundation of the earth itself, and still worse, cause an increasing fragmentation of science. Quote, pigeonholed knowledge by individuals of more and more about less and less, which, if persisted indefinitely, can only lead mankind to a sort of idiocy, in which the breakdown of meaning will mean that there will be no means of communication between one intelligence and another. Does that sound familiar? It sounds to me like Owen Barfield got in a time machine and described the year 2022, where the sciences have become absurd and words no longer seem to have any meaning. We can no longer even agree on the meaning of the word woman. A Supreme Court justice, a woman, in her Senate confirmation hearings, was not able to define woman. Why could she not define it? Well, because she said she's not a biologist. This woman is a double Harvard grad. This woman is a federal judge put up for the highest court in the land. But she lacked scientific credentials, and therefore she could not describe even her own identity. By the way, I sympathize with her. I really do. We conservatives, we all made fun of Justice Jackson, but frankly, our answer to that question has not been all that much better than hers. Our answer to that question, what is a woman, has more or less been genitals and chromosomes. A woman is a person with a womb and 2 X chromosomes. That's what we've said. Justice Jackson's answer, or non-answer, I guess, is that woman means more than just a womb and 2 X chromosomes. In a way, she was closer to the truth than we conservatives have been. Justice Jackson, like all the libs, is quite mistaken if she believes that some hulking man in a miniskirt can actually be a woman. But she is quite right to acknowledge that women are more than their chromosomes. Ironically, when conservatives define women in that purely physical way, we accept the very soul-denying scientism that the libs have peddled to get us into this mess of meaninglessness in the first place. When I was a kid, I was taught that girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice. Today I am told that women are made of X chromosomes, whatever that is. Which representation is closer to the truth? Of course, it's not even close. Of course, sugar and spice and everything nice. Of course. Of course, that conveys much more clearly the reality of what a woman is than X chromosomes does. Man is the center of the universe conveys much more clearly the reality of our position than does a rock around a ball of gas in the Pisces-Cetus super galaxy cluster. The image and likeness of God conveys much more precisely the reality of who we are than does carbon and oxygen and 80% water. It is not the case, as many people mistakenly believe today, that the scientific view of things is objectively true, while the philosophical and religious views are mere interesting representations. They're all representations. All of it. They're all just models. They're all just pictures. Whatever image you have in your mind right now of what the universe looks like is only that. It is only an image. Even according to the most modern, fancy scientific models, only 5% of the universe is even visible. All the stars the planets, the galaxies, every single thing that you imagine when you imagine the universe, 5%, according to the newest models. 25% of the universe, so 5 times the stuff that you are thinking of, is made up of dark matter, whatever that is. A whopping 70%, so 14 times what you are thinking of as the universe, is made up of dark energy, whatever that is. Again, it's all sort of a moot point, because whatever picture you have in your mind of the visible universe, the atoms and the protons and the photons and all the other stuff you learned in 8th grade, that is not really what the universe is made of. It's just a picture, and I promise you it is not a particularly accurate picture at that. Whatever we picture in our heads is necessarily a representation, scientific, religious, anything in between. That's not a bad thing. Representations are necessary for making sense of the world, for saving the appearances, to use Owen Barfield's phrase. But representations become idols when we mistake them for ultimate reality. And while we easily recognize idols in the context of religion, the scientific revolution, with its attendant magic and wonders, has rendered us oblivious to the ubiquitous idolatry of science. This is not only true of the libs, this is true of conservatives as well. It is not just the libs who wrap themselves in the mantle of science, but we conservatives too, who reach for scientific observations to prove all of our points. When conservatives object to transgenderism, it is not usually on the basis of the complementarity of the sexes. It's not usually on the basis of the purpose and duties that go along with sex. Usually it's on the basis of science. We say, so-and-so is a biological male, so-and-so is a biological female, as though one could somehow simultaneously be a biological male and a spiritual female and a philosophical orangutan or whatever. And, more to the point, as though biology, that is, the scientific representation, were the ultimate authority, which it is not. We more readily mistake the scientific representations for ultimate reality because we flatter ourselves with our advancement in technology. We have Teslas and iPhones, so we delude ourselves into thinking that we have demystified the universe. I can doom scroll on that little portal to hell that I keep in my pocket. So therefore, I have comprehended ultimate reality, haven't I? I don't think so. That is nothing but flattery. Yes, we can tweet and drive and fly, but even our most sophisticated scientific perspective leaves us unable to answer fairly basic questions. Just consider the 3-body problem. I've always loved the 3-body problem. Say you've got 3 bodies. You've got the sun, the moon, and the earth. Say you know the initial position and velocity of all 3 bodies. It should be very simple to know the subsequent motion of those bodies, right? Because we're really smart and we have iPhones and Teslas and we're so scientific, right? Except we can't do it. And not only can we not know the subsequent motion of those bodies, but we can know for a fact that we cannot know it. It turns out that there is no general closed-form solution for their motion. Take Hilbert's problems. If anyone has taken a college math course, you've probably heard of Hilbert's problems. 23 problems in mathematics put forward at the turn of the 20th century by the mathematician David Hilbert. 122 years later, not only do many of the questions remain unresolved or only partially resolved, but in fact the first 2, the continuum hypothesis and the consistency of the axioms of arithmetic, have been proven to be impossible to prove. Why do I mention this? Is it to discourse on Gödel and Cantor and all the other mathematicians whose work I don't understand at all? No, it certainly is not. Rather, it is to point out the severe limitations of human knowledge, not just what we don't know, but what we provably cannot possibly know. The scientific worldview, more than other representations, has flattered us into believing that we can comprehend and therefore control ultimate reality. It is the pretense of the mad scientist in the laboratory and the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the lie that we shall be as gods. In reality, that appeal to our pride has brought with its fun technological trinkets overwhelming disenchantment and confusion. about who we are, about what we are for, about what is a man, about what is a woman. The scientific liberals call us ignorant. We are. We are ignorant, though perhaps not quite so ignorant as they, if at least we know it and can admit it. They call us anti-science. Fine by me. It is good to see that the earth revolves around the sun. It is better to see the love that moves the sun and the other stars. Thank you very much.